Have you ever looked up at the night sky and thought like, wow, are we really all alone out here?
Yeah, it's a question that's fascinated people for centuries.
It really has. And today we're going deep on that question, diving into a book called 5 Billion Years of Solitude by Lee Billings.
Oh, that's a great one.
It's all about astrobiology, the search for life beyond Earth.
Right, and Billings does an amazing job of taking you on this journey through the science, the history, even the philosophy behind it all.
He really does. So for anyone listening who maybe hasn't read the book, what would you say is like the biggest thing that Billings wants us to understand?
I think, first and foremost, it's the sheer scale of the universe. He really throws you headfirst into just how unbelievably vast it is.
Yeah, and I was going to say, he uses this analogy, trying to find a habitable planet is like looking for a specific grain of sand on every single beach on Earth.
It's mind-boggling, and it kind of makes you feel small, right? But Billings uses that feeling to make a point. That understanding this vastness is essential to understanding the uniqueness and the fragility of life here on Earth.
It's a perspective shift for sure. Okay, so the universe is enormous. Got it. But how do we even begin to search for life in that kind of immensity?
Well, that's where the technology comes in. Billings talks about how far we've come from those early grainy images from telescopes to these incredibly powerful instruments.
Right. He talks about things like the Kepler Space Telescope, right?
Exactly. Kepler, despite some setbacks with its mechanics, it was able to identify thousands of potential planets outside our solar system. Just imagine thousands of other worlds out there.
That is wild. And they do it by measuring those tiny dips in starlight?
Yeah. When a planet passes in front of a star, from our perspective, it blocks out a tiny bit of light. Kepler can detect those changes, and that's how we find these exoplanets.
So finding them is one thing, but how do we know if they could actually support life?
Well, we look for clues, right? We look for planets that are in the habitable zone, sometimes called the Goldilocks zone, around their star.
Okay, I've heard of that meaning.
It means the planet is at just the right distance from its star for liquid water to exist on the surface. Not too hot, not too cold.
So just right for potentially life as we know it. Does Billings go into any specific examples of exoplanets that have got scientists excited?
He does. There's one system he talks about, the TRAPPIST-1 system. It's a star with 7, count 'em, 7 Earth-sized planets orbiting it.
7, wow.
And what's really cool is 3 of those planets are within the habitable zone. So we're talking about a whole system with multiple planets that could potentially have conditions suitable for life.
Okay, so that suggests we might not be so alone after all, right?
Right, and that brings up a whole other layer to this.
Which is?
The philosophical side of things. What are the implications of finding life beyond Earth? How would that change our understanding of ourselves, our place in the universe?
Yeah. Like, Billings asks this really thought-provoking question.
What's that?
If we do encounter another civilization, would it be more or less advanced than us? And what would that mean for how we see ourselves?
Whoa, yeah, that's a big one. And I think that's one of the things I love about this book. It's not just about the science, it's about those big questions. It forces us to confront our own assumptions and biases.
It really makes you think. So we've talked about the vastness of the universe, the amazing technology we're using to search for life, and we touched on some of the philosophical questions this raises. What else stood out to you?
Well, one thing that Billings really emphasizes is the fragility of life on Earth. And he argues that searching for life elsewhere actually makes us appreciate what we have here even more.
Oh, interesting.
It gives us a broader perspective on the environmental challenges we face. We start to see Earth not just as our home, but as one precious example of life in a vast and possibly empty universe.
That's a powerful thought. And he doesn't shy away from some of the potential ethical dilemmas either, right? Like the whole issue of planetary protection.
Oh, absolutely. He talks about the need to avoid contaminating other worlds with Earth microbes.
And vice versa, making sure anything we bring back doesn't pose a risk to life here.
Exactly. It really highlights the responsibility that comes with this kind of exploration. We're not just searching for life or potentially interacting with it, impacting it. That raises a lot of ethical questions.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to the whole thing. So to wrap things up, would you say that 5 Billion Years of Solitude is ultimately a book about hope? Or maybe about despair?
I wouldn't say either, actually. I think it's a book about wonder. It's about that deep human desire to understand our place in the cosmos, to know if we're alone, and to grapple with the implications of either answer. It's a book that really stays with you.
It really does. And for anyone listening who's feeling that sense of wonder, that curiosity about what else might be out there, I highly recommend checking out 5 Billion Years of Solitude. It's a journey you won't regret.
Absolutely. And you know, one thing that really stuck with me was Billings' closing thought.
Oh yeah? What was that?
He said, "Perhaps the greatest challenge of astrobiology is not finding life beyond Earth, but learning to truly appreciate the life we already have."
Wow, that's beautiful. And I think it leaves us with a lot to think about, even beyond the search for extraterrestrial life.
Definitely.
So for everyone listening, keep looking up at those stars and keep asking those big questions. Who knows what we might find?
Exactly.
And that's a wrap on this episode.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Always a pleasure. Until next time, folks.